Okay, so does it sound like my microphone is working? Oh, great, excellent. Well, thanks very much for coming along and for diving so quickly into this. Sorry, we had to cut off the end of the panel discussion. We'll probably have some people floating across during the talk, but I'll dive on in. And so today I'm here actually in my capacity as Deputy Director of the Threatened Species Recovery Hub. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the sorts of research that we do, partly as a bit of an introduction to several of the talks at the conference, including during this session. Some of you may be aware of our Research Showcase Day on Thursday, which I'll give you some information about at the end, which you're still welcome to register for if you happen to have a spare Thursday lying about. But I thought in this talk it would be nice, it's just a short talk, I can't cover all the stuff the Hub does, but I can talk about one of the things that I think is more unique about the way we do research. And that is that partnerships with end users of that research are really central throughout the whole research process. But I thought I'd start with an example, and this critter here is the very unfortunately named northern eastern bristlebird. So you might be familiar with the eastern bristlebird, it's part of that species, but it has a really distinct population and it lives only in the grassy patches amongst the Gondwanan rainforests on the Queensland-New South Wales border. So it's very specialised and has very distinct habitat needs to all other eastern bristlebirds. Now, Zoe Stone has been working on this bird as part of her PhD for the last few years, and she's discovered that in the last 30 years, even in the places where there have recently been bristlebirds seen, the size of those grassy patches has declined by on average half. And so has the population. And last year we discovered that there are only 5 breeding pairs in the wild left of this critter. So we've just heard about some very sad stories this morning about the bramble-key melomys, about the Christmas Island pipistrelle. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the next animal that we'll lose forever unless we do something really, really quickly. So this is Zoe there in one of the patches. And so what we've been able to do as part of the Hub is to really try to bring together all of the partners who need to work together to quickly act and try to save this critter. And it's on the border, so we need people from state agencies in Queensland and in New South Wales. We have two main Indigenous groups in the area which have various projects on the go and in the design phases to actually replace the grassy cultural pathways in this landscape. So the fact that these grassy patches have been disappearing is maybe news to some scientists, but it's not news to the people who live there traditionally. So we need to be able to bring all of these efforts together if we're actually going to be able to do something quickly and save this bird. Now, luckily, we have a few birds, about a dozen birds in captivity, and so all is not lost. But it is going to take a huge effort in partnership to save this bird. And, you know, in 3 years' time, it'll be, watch this space. We'll find out what happens. I don't know why there's a blue square there. This is not the situation we want to be in when it comes to threatened species conservation. Okay, that's the emergency room. That's about as dire a situation as you can possibly imagine. And so the Hub is also doing research right at the other end of the scale. If we're going to actually try to get awareness, I mean, as we heard from Christopher this morning, we need to be able to be aware of what's out there and how it's faring. And yet Australia doesn't really have very good, organised, coordinated monitoring and tracking of the fate of its threatened species. We need to mainstream this. We need to make a threatened species index something that pops up on the ABC News, and Alan Kohler talks about it. And when I finish talking, Elisa is going to tell you about her project in the Hub, which is doing just that, trying to mainstream this interest in and awareness of how our threatened species are doing. Hopefully not as bad as that red line there. That's obviously just a mocked-up photo, but one of these days we hope we'll see something like this and really get the awareness of what we need to do for threatened species to be right up there with. People manage to sit through reports on the ASX every night, so why not the TSX? So this program that I've been talking about, the Threatened Species Recovery Hub, so it's a big collaboration Now, it's got 11 lead institutions, and those are the institutions that are putting money in, and to match the funding from the Australian Government's National Environmental Science Program. So the National Environmental Science Program funds 6 applied environmental research hubs, and the Threatened Species Recovery Hub is just one of them. So with these partners and the federal funding, that's $60 million over 6 years. And that funds, well, at the moment we've got about 35 postdoctoral researchers, 53 PhD students working away on a whole range of threatened species questions, and a swag of staff and researchers contributing their time and their expertise to make this work as a broad collaboration. The distinction is that they're not projects just done in isolation, but there are over 100 of them, so it's really hard to be across any one. So this gives you an idea of the geographic spread of all the different threatened species research projects that are going on, and there are several that are relevant sort of nationally, doing nationally relevant work, such as the work that Megan Emmons will be talking about this afternoon on environmental offsetting, for example, which is an issue everywhere. There's no way, even with that investment that I just described, that we could do that without partners. And there are, at last count, about 126 different partner organisations, so government agencies, non-government organisations, consultancies, zoos, all sorts of expertise and end users that we need to bring into this space to make the work that we do as efficient as possible and as effective as possible as actually driving some change for the many threatened species that we're working on across the board. Now, I guess the thing I wanted to highlight is that this is not normal for academics. So I'm an academic, I work in a university, our students and our postdocs are working in that university environment. And we're used to thinking about academics as being maybe a bit separate from reality, locked away in their ivory tower, doing research that often seems really hard to even understand, let alone use, in the real world. And it's obviously not a very ideal way to do things. And so this is what the Hub is trying to tackle, this perception that academics are somehow a bit separate. I'll just wait for a few people to sit down because I can't see you. Yeah, there's a fair few out there. That's all right. We can take a small pause, a really small pause. Oh no, this is. I'll just be really quick. Okay, thanks. All right, I'll keep going. So academics are often seen to be responding to a really different set of criteria, of incentives, and it's true, it's the push to publish in obscure but terribly, terribly important scientific journals and so on. And I know this perception is true because I was running a workshop a couple of weeks ago with people from industry, consultants, government departments and so on, and I had to institute a rule that anybody who used the term academic pejoratively was down on the list to take a shot. And that night, a lot of people got very drunk. So it's obvious why that ivory tower model, and just focusing on publication as an end in itself is useless to people who want to use research, who need research on threatened species. Well, why should academics change? What is it that's driving the change amongst the academics? Well, obviously, there are probably many academics in this room who I've just absolutely offended beyond belief, because if we're working on threatened species, chances are we don't see ourselves as being like that anyway. We don't see ourselves as being isolated because we actually want to see a difference in the real world. But we don't always know the best way to do it. Luckily, university incentives are changing. So the ARC, which universities care a lot about what the ARC thinks, this year has its first engagement and impact exercise. They're going to assess the universities to see how well their research actually changes the world outside of academia. So this is really important. And also, as we hear again and again, most people who go and do a PhD aren't going to end up staying in academia for the rest of their life. They're going to also live in that real world that I hear is out there. And so they need to learn how to work with real people, but people, experts beyond academia, end users of their research. If they have that through their training, then they're going to be much more equipped for that next step. So there are lots of good reasons why we do this. Now, how has it emerged? There are a few different things. This didn't start miraculously with the start of the Threatened Species Recovery Hub. There have been relationships in place, predecessor collaborations that have existed, and many of us working with many of you over many years. But bringing those partnerships together and then putting a structure around it, having a steering committee that includes representatives from key end users, having a stakeholder reference group, here we're consulting in Melbourne about our research program, an Indigenous reference group, being able to tap into a skilled and dedicated knowledge broker, heaps of communication products. These are all things that, well, when I did my PhD, I didn't have access to that sort of support network at all. I didn't have someone I could go to and say, I'm going to Canberra, I really want to talk to the people who work on X, you know, in policy. Can you put me in touch with them? And now we do. And these are some of these people. And a couple of them are here. Jana, do you want to wave? Jana Dielenberg is our Science Communications Manager. And Rachel Morgan will be speaking a little bit later too, so you'll get to know Rachel. So we have a whole team behind us. I know that I'm running out of time, so I'm sort of going to push on a bit, 1 minute. And so you'll hear about one of our research projects up next. Elisa Bayraktarov is going to talk about that Threatened Species Network, so I hope I've whet your appetite for that. Rachel Morgan is going to stand in for somebody who wasn't able to turn up today later in this session. Megan Evans this afternoon is going to talk about how we can do biodiversity offsets better for threatened species. Sarah Beckersey is one of the plenaries tomorrow morning talking about nature in cities, and David Duncan also on tomorrow talking about restoring threatened woodlands. I hope he's going to talk about bull oak woodlands, my very favourite. So there are heaps of challenges. I promised I'd mention the challenges and not just do a promo talk, but I've run out of time. But I think that what's up there is pretty familiar to many people. We can't fix everything. The only way to do it is to extend these partnerships even more. We're learning as we go, and I think now we've really hit on a model that works really well. All of our projects only get approval after there are end users who have been involved in the design phase, like right from the start, not just at the end. But our time's nearly up. So we think that the model that's developing here of a community of practice that brings together the people in the universities, the experts everywhere outside of universities, and all of the practitioners who use our research is a fantastic thing to have built. And we don't want to lose it, so we hope that beyond 2020, when the funding runs out, there'll be more ways to keep that partnership going. Thanks very much. Lots of ways to engage with our research. I mentioned the showcase on Thursday, and I think Rachel will tell you a bit about that, but we'll leave behind some flyers at the front for anyone who wants to register and come along if you're not already. Thanks very much.